What's going on, besties? It's Bad Soy, and I'm back for another beat breakdown. Now, I haven't done one of these in years, like literally years. The last one I did was in 2021, so I'm pretty excited to hop back into this and show you how this beat was constructed. Now, the whole thing is based around a saxophone performance that was posted by Culture Link Gaming. I definitely recommend you go check it out. I'll have it linked in the description as well. Beautiful saxophone performance. And what I wanted to do was basically base my arrangement around that. So everything in here services that saxophone performance. Now the intro starts with a chopped section. It sounds like this. Now, it's those iconic three notes. Now, we wanted to mess with it, but not to the point where it was unrecognizable, because you want the listener, which is you guys, I want to give you guys something to latch onto. Now, when we go into the next section, you'll see that we've completely chopped it up, completely transformed it. What we've done is load the saxophone sample into Slice X, which is a plugin that is literally just for chopping and cutting samples. Now, all these little cuts here are basically assigned to the notes on the keyboard here. So I can actually take that saxophone line and rearrange it almost, which is pretty awesome. If we go from the saxophone to this, you won't recognize it. If we move forward 4 bars, we reintroduce that lead saxophone line, and it sounds like this. Now, so far, they're fighting for space, right? But we're going to fix that later. We then go to the saxophone lead. Now, as I said before, this is a beautiful performance, so I wanted to have a section where it was just the lead line, not changed at all. I've thrown a few filters on it. It sounds like this. And then we reintroduce that lead line at the end of the song during the outro. Now, I want to move next to the drums. For lo-fi, this is a pretty complex rhythm section that changes a lot, but it never gets too overpowering. So we start here. Very, very simple kick, snare pattern, hip-hop vibes, nothing crazy. We have a little transition section here on the toms. And then some percussion, which almost doubles as like really mild claps. Nothing crazy. The next thing we add is the sample kit. Now, I took a pre-made drum loop and, like I did with the saxophone, chopped it up. Not to the extent where it's unrecognizable. It still kind of sounds like drums. You chop the drums so they sound individual hits, but still connected in a way, sonically connected. So that's what this is going to sound like. You can see here if I zoom in, they've just been rearranged. We get to the hats, a ride cymbal, nothing crazy. Now we get to the hi-hats. I think the hi-hats are pretty interesting. There's essentially 2 different patterns happening. So we start with a traditional vinyl hat sound. Nothing crazy. This is what you would get in the most simple, relaxing lo-fi. Where it gets interesting is we introduce a little trap pattern. Now, trap hats, you've got that really short staccato hat samples and the triplets, the rolls. And you hear it in a lot of music, but this is what it sounds like. Now, those rolls kind of lead you on to the next section. They add a little bit of excitement. What I think is awesome is when you put those two sections together, again, it gets faster. It feels faster without actually getting faster. I think it's really cool. So that's exactly the same tempo, but because we've added that second layer in, it gives it, again, a sense of urgency, almost. Lastly, we just have some crash sounds. These are purely to illustrate that we're moving on to a next section. So we have the intro and the outro. Nothing crazy. They're more signposts than anything. But if we put all of that together, it's going to sound pretty awesome. Well, let's go from here. So this section isn't even using all of the drum sections, but you've got a pretty solid beat going, right? If we switch back over to the drum sample kit, so it's just different, but still pretty groovy. Now, that's the drums sorted. Let's go to the 808. Super simple bass section, right? There's really nothing on this bass except OTT, which is a multiband compressor, and I've cut out some of the highs. Now, without any of the plugins, it just sounds a little empty. Just gives it a little bit more bite. The bass is actually in mono, dead center. If you have a mixing spectrum, your bass is in the middle and everything else, all the other instruments, are kind of built around that. Panned around that, sorry. So that's the bass sorted, right? I have a lot of synth lines here. This is all backing for the saxophone. If we play it on its own, it's pretty sparse, but it's meant to be. If we add the saxophone in, it gives it a bit more melodic depth. And then we add a little bit of a arpeggio just on the top here. It's super, there's no low end in that at all. There's no bass, and that's just to come in and add a bit of sparkle on the top. I mean, that's why it's called the sparkle arpeggio. I add 2 leads in. Now you have that really harsh kind of gritty rhythmic lead. That adds a little bit more rhythm, because in this section the drums, they're still there, but they're really quiet. So that's going to add the movement. And then we add just another layer. The reason those two are added is we don't want this section to sound exactly the same as the synth in this section. The last thing to add is piano. I mean, we kind of added it in because this section is actually the exact same notes as this saxophone section here, but because it's on piano, it's going to keep the song sounding exciting. Sweet. Lastly, we have some impacts and risers. These aren't anything crazy. Again, signposts just to add transitions, and you know, it's not lo-fi unless you add a little bit of dialogue. That's dialogue from the game. Now, if we just unmute everything for a second, you essentially have two sections, right? The second section is this lead section here. All this backing here is going to essentially back up the saxophone lead line. The whole arrangement here is sorted, right? From there, we add all the effects. There's a lot going on here. So if we start from the drums, like it sounds fine, but just very clean. We have sweet drums. Now, sweet drums is a drum processor. And for the life of me, I have no idea what it does. This user interface gives you no information whatsoever, but I think it just applies some compression and you can boost it up. It makes it sound really nice. So without, and then if we add it, makes it a little bit louder, it gives it a little more punch. The next thing we add is retro color. You have just a few effects that are going to make your whatever you have it on just sound really a little more vintage. So if we turn it off, you know how that sounds. We'll add it. So nothing crazy. We have a little vinyl wobble on there, so that's gonna make the sound wobble. That's really all there is to it. Little distortion to boost the volume and make it sound a little more grainier. Reverb. Now, you never want a lot of reverb on the drums. You only want the slightest bit because you want to make it sound like it's in a room, super organic. And then magnetic. I think this is supposed to be like a tape machine thing. I'm not too sure, but it's got some wear on it. So yeah, just making it sound really old and kind of faded. The last thing we do is add sketch cassette. So this is a pretty sick plugin. I never have to tweak it that much when I add it on. It just kind of automatically applies a really nice filter over it, cuts out some of the high end, and makes it sound a little more warmer. We have it set on the standard tape, new. So yeah, without, and then we'll add it in. So we're going to turn all these effects off, and then we're going to turn them on again. That's the drums. Let's move over to the saxophone, the main hook of the song. So the saxophone is coming in on bus 3. Now, usually a good idea is to put all your effects on a bus and have the instruments going to that bus. But I wasn't wise, so I did the wrong thing. So these are... oh, there are so many effects on this saxophone. Let's start with the slices. Now, if we mute all the effects, it sounds like this. We start with a compressor. Now, the compressor, what this does, I don't think you're going to really notice it by listening, but you'll see here that it'll push the quiet bits up and push the high bits down, like the loud bits down. And if we add that, it'll sound like this. So without, with. So you can see the loud cuts are being pushed down to match the rest of it. Again, not really noticeable, but I think it just makes it sound a little smoother. The next thing we add, again, retro color without, and then let's add it. Yeah, and you already know what all these do. Digital, which gives it like a bit crushing effect, is really cool. And yeah, that's about it for retro color. Now, these two here are transitional things. I'll turn them on real quick, but they're really quick. So the tape stop is this section here. Yeah, it just kind of takes the sound and pitches it down really quickly. It's good for transitions, which is cool. And then the DJM filter, which you saw on there just under the tape stop, what that one does, it's going to come up and it's going to bring the highs back in. I don't know if you heard that. It's really fast, but yeah, you can hear that it starts bassy and ends trebly. Moving on to the saxophone the solo. I have another DJM filter. So that DJM filter comes in at the end. It makes the saxophone really dark. And then during the solo, we just add some reverb. So without... It's not a great deal. It's only about 94 seconds of decay, but it just makes it sound a bit more roomy, a bit bigger. Now, let's move on to the chop bit. Let's bypass the effects. You can see that without the effects, it actually resembles the saxophone more. You just kind of want to get rid of the choppy nature, but have the implication that it's still there. So, first thing we add, OTT. Again, this is going to make it louder. This is going to add a bit more depth, punch, bass. Now we've added an EQ, and we've cut out all the low there. This is just unnecessary noise that's not really adding anything. It just cleans up the sound overall. Sketch cassette, again, and then retro color to degrade the sound even more. And then we have a tremolo. This is going to add that pumping sound. So again, subtle, can't really hear it, but what that does is glue the cuts together. So the volume ducks a little bit, usually when those cuts happen. And it just kind of makes it sound like it's intentional, like that's how it was always performed. Now, lastly, we have a filter again. I added this here just for transitional effect. You already know what it does. It just cuts out the highs. Cool. So that's all the saxophone stuff. Now, earlier in the video, I said that these two sections were clashing. Now, they were doing that because I didn't have any of the effects on. But with the effects, what we've done is mono these, so they aren't in stereo. And then we've panned them slightly left, slightly right. So with the effects, when they're playing together, they aren't fighting for space. So when they happen, you'll see that we have the DJM filter on there. So this one, all the highs are going to get cut out. Whereas this one, the chops, the saxophone chops, which is this one here, they still have their highs. So they're no longer arguing for space. One's occupying the low, one's occupying the high. And it sounds like this. Let's move on to the synth sections. So that's with everything. It actually sounds pretty awesome. And as you can see, they are very quiet. Now, we want them quiet because, yeah, as I said before, they're not meant to overpower the saxophone. So again, we have a little tremolo here that's giving it that pulsing movement. And then on the synth plucks, we have nothing, actually. Now, let's move on to the piano. All this is just to back this saxophone up while keeping the arrangement interesting. This section is exactly the same as this section, but we've taken out the solo and added more synth layers in. The reason we've done that is because you hear the saxophone for most of the song, like at least 80%. And if you just keep hearing it, it's just going to get kind of dull. So you have one section where it's not there, you know? You got to miss it for a little bit. And then we bring it back right at the end to bring it full circle. Starts with the saxophone, ends with the saxophone. Now, we put some effects on the master channel. Rather than degrade individual instruments, this retro color and sketch cassette is going to degrade the whole song. So everything. It's going to degrade the bass, the drums, the saxophone. If we hit retro color, what retro color has done is just add noise. Noise is really good. The reason you hear it in a lot of lo-fi, it's not just an aesthetic choice. It's there to add a little bit of high end. The next thing we're going to do is add sketch cassette. You can see here we've got it on the master cassette, but we've degraded it a little. So without. And then we'll add it in. Alright, so we've finally reached the end. This is the final step to finishing up this remix. Now, I've bounced the whole track out into one audio file. So I've exported it, and now it's a song. It's a file ready to go. But the original project was at 140 BPM. Now, that's a nice groove, but I feel like it's a little bit too fast for lo-fi. So what I've done is brought the tempo down to 100, and what I'm going to do is stretch. I have the stretch tool, so I'm going to stretch out the song. Now, I'm going to bring it down to about 65 bars. Now, what this is going to do is lower the pitch of the song and make it slower. I don't want to do the slow to reverb thing, but I just want to make this song sit in around 90 to 100 BPM, which is kind of like your ideal lo-fi tempo. So now that it's slowed down, it's going to sound something like this. And that's it. That is my remix of Culture Link Gaming's saxophone solo for ODST. The song will be linked in the description below, as well as at the end of the video. You can find me on Spotify as well. I have some music up there. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks very much for sticking around. If you made it till the end, that's awesome. Hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I've got plenty more remixes to come, so stay tuned. See you guys.